Hello everybody, this is Yoko Cinema Reactions, and this is going to be my review for My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, Episode 2. I know I haven't touched this show in a while, but I just got done doing 4 episodes for it, so it's going to be for Episode 2. Obviously Katarina's trying to figure out ways that she can avoid her impending doom, and I actually don't know if I mentioned this last review, but wait, no, this is gonna have to be for, I think episode 4 is what I'm going to mention this for. Not episode 4, episode 5, I'm sorry. Episode 5. Anyway, this episode we get introduced to Mary Hunt. Katarina gets invited to a tea party, and I cannot remember for the life of me, but is Keith and Katarina related? Like cousins or something? I cannot remember, because I know that he's her adopted brother. I just can't remember if it's through cousins or a friend of her father's or something. I'm assuming a friend of her father's, because if they're not related, then this next few episodes aren't going to be too bad. But if they are related, then that's going to be a little bit worse. Because, sorry, I'm tired today. I'm always tired. Anyway, she gets invited to a tea party by some girls, and one of the girls, the youngest sister, ends up being Mary Hunt. And she seems to be a bit shy, doesn't really talk to people. But Katarina doesn't really notice that too much. And when they get there, she makes a beeline for the sweets, even though her mother told her not to eat too many. And even Keith tells her not to slow down on the food, because you eat too fast or too much of something, you could either get sick or get a stomach ache. And it ends up being the latter. She has to go to the bathroom. As she's heading back, she ends up seeing the garden out there, and it looks, I don't know what it is about anime, but they make anything look amazing. They make the colors pop. They make it look real. Well, as real as we're gonna get anyway. And she's fawning over it because, she's been trying to get her garden to grow, and the plants she's been growing have not been growing. They've been wilting, actually. And she ends up seeing Mary in the yard, or in the garden, and, was talking to her, and asked her, who was the gardener that's been taking care of your garden? It looks amazing. I want some tips. And it turns out Mary's been the one tending the garden, and I'm like, you've been tending the gigantic garden, growing all those plants, taking out the weeds, watering them, making sure they get what they need, and doing whatever the hell else you do during the day. How do you have the time for that? And because I'm sure she's got tutoring sessions. I mean, she's got to know how to read and write, obviously. And other things, of course. Because I'm sure she knows how to read and write by this point. They're probably 8 years old. So, obviously, she's geeking out and asking her questions, wanting to know if essentially telling her, I've been trying to grow plants, but my plants have been wilting. Could you give me any tips? And she has her come over and examine the garden, and as I looked at it, I was like, wait a minute, this looks like it's in a lot of shade. Maybe you planted it in the shade, and that's why it's not getting enough sunlight. Is the problem, because apparently she's been watering and fertilizing it, but it's still not working, so there has to be something else. And Mary mentions that maybe we could find a different spot for them to grow in, and yeah, it more than likely was lack of sunlight. And they do plant them, and they start flourishing after a while. And by this point, her and Mary have become decent friends, and we come to find out that Mary's mother is actually her father's second husband. And her siblings were none too kind about that, because I'm guessing that her father divorced his first wife to be with his second wife, possibly. I don't know. And obviously she was verbally abused because of that by them. And thus, because of Katerina, Mary now has a friend. And Katerina actually... Wait, is this in... Shoot, I can't remember if this is in episode 2 or... Yeah, this should be episode 3. Episode 2, I mean, sorry. This is episode 2. Because the first episode of the time skip, I think, was episode 4. And then 5. And episode 2 and 3 is still when they're on the trial. Okay, anyway, she essentially tells Mary, you've got a green thumb, you've got a talent for this sort of thing. And she realizes later on that was a line that Mary's fiancé, Alan, the prince's brother, uses on her. And I was like, oh, what's going to happen if he can't use that line? Is that going to mess anything up? And Mary later meets with Alan, and she's going on and on about Katerina, and ends up using that same information about how, oh, my friend Katerina told me this, and yeah, now Alan couldn't use the line, and he's a little bit pissed off. And at first, I couldn't place who the frickin' voice is from, because it sounded familiar, and it's Aaron. It's Aaron, a young Aaron. I'm like, oh my god, don't tell me he's gonna grow up to be old Aaron. Oh god. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just, I kind of prefer the young Aaron voice, to be honest. Anyway, he's all upset that she's been spending all that time with Mary, and is claiming that Katerina's trying to seduce her. And I'm like, why was your first jump to conclusion seducing? One, I don't think either girl swings that way, though. The way that it's been going, who knows? They could be bisexual for all I know. Anyway, but Mary was apparently going on and on about Katerina and everything, and I'm like, and they've been spending all their time together, and I'm like, dude, they're friends. What do you expect friends to do? Do they not hang out with each other? But yeah, apparently the guy's got an inferiority complex when it comes to his brother, because he keeps being compared to his brother, and thus doesn't think he's good at anything. And he tries to have a showdown with Katerina, of her choosing, because she's a girl. And this ends up being his downfall, because she picks tree climbing. And I think she was a literal monkey in her past life, not her previous life. I think the one before that, because she freaking climbs up there like a spider monkey. And no matter how hard he tries, he cannot beat her in that. And he keeps on trying, again, and again, and again. Until his brother shows up and tells him, I think you've beaten this into the ground, you've not won one time in this. But yeah, it's just... And it got to the point where, I think earlier in the episode, when she's confronting Alan about this, dang it, what did she essentially say to him? I just watched the episode today. So, essentially she insulted him, and I was like, when she did that, I was like, oh dear. Because with the way things like this can go in a romance anime, I was thinking, oh, this is gonna possibly make it him like her. He's like, no one's ever said this to me before. And he would end up having a crush on her. That's why I thought was going. And no, it's when he challenged her to the showdown, I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway, Katarina ends up picking another thing for them to duel over, I guess you could say. And it ends up being the piano. And I was like, does she know how to play the piano? And apparently she does. Quite decently, I might add. And then when he goes to sit down and play, I was like, oh, does he even know how to play? I would assume that any kind of royalty or nobility would have been versed at least somewhat in at least one instrument. Because, I mean, they're expected to be the pinnacle of high society and grace and everything. And, I mean, music kind of is like one of the standards of being a noble or royalty. And he does play very, very well, I might add. But he doesn't believe them when they tell him that was amazing. He thinks they're mocking him. And it all comes back to that inferiority complex over his brother, and Katarina tells him that there are things that you are good at and then are bad at, and same goes for your brother. There are things that he's good at and things that he's bad at. And he was like, I don't think there's anything he's bad at. And we come to find out that he has a bit of a fear of snakes. At first, when she pulled it out of the ground, it didn't really show what it was. I thought it was maybe like a centipede or something. But no, it was a snake, and she grabbed a toy snake she'd been carrying around just for this such an emergency, and tossed it in front of him as his brother was coming up the road. And the look on his face when he spots it. Oh, Alan, remember that. He loves it. He loves that he finally has something on his brother. And because of this little stunt, now he's gonna her fiance. I can't remember, how do you pronounce his name? Georgian, whatever the heck his name is. He's now gonna report her to her mother about the tree climbing, because apparently, I guess a lady shouldn't be tree climbing. So yeah, he got back at her for that. Anyway, this is definitely gonna be an interesting show, because there are ways that she could try to avoid her impending doom with the end of her route, but apparently things are changing in a way that that weren't from the game. Because by the time skip, Alan has gotten over his inferiority complex and thus doesn't have it anymore. And because of how she's around Keith all that much, he never turns out to be a playboy like he is in the game, and thus he's actually the opposite. He gets all flustered and everything when anybody mentions having a crush on someone or something like that. So this could definitely be interesting. It could go any sort of different way at this point. Anyway, I will see everybody next time.